It's another one of those days when we find ourselves in a dilemma. What do we speak about? There is so much that needs to be talked about. So where do we actually start? It's very interesting that the first talks were held today in Amman, Jordan, the first talks in at least 1 year between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, let me see if I can paint this scenario for you because you need to see what's happening here. Do you remember, let's go back to September the 23rd, when Mahmoud Abbas stood before the United Nations, made his famous speech, and that's when he presented his application for the Palestinians to be admitted to the United Nations as full-fledged members and the sovereignty of the Palestinian state be recognized. Well, that same day, the quartet launched a new peace initiative, and that peace initiative had timetables attached to it. It was supposed to begin talks within 1 month, which would have been by October the 23rd, and then 3 months from there, the final borders between Israel and the Palestinians was to be determined, and then 3 months later, the International Peace Conference was to be held in Russia, and then finally by December the 2012, at the latest, the total peace agreement was to be concluded and implemented. So they set a timetable for peace in the Middle East, for a final deal between Palestinians and Israelis. Well, that's part of what this meeting is all about in Amman, Jordan, because what's happened is King Abdullah of Jordan, is attempting to use his privileged position as a country that has a peace treaty with Israel and yet at the same time has loyalties to the Palestinians. So he's the perfect go-between, and he's attempting to facilitate the requirements of the quartet. Now, here's what's happened. By January the 23rd, they are supposed to have submitted to the quartet where they would accept final borders to be. Both Israel and the Palestinians are to have submitted that. Well, at the meeting yesterday, the Palestinians went ahead and submitted where they think the borders should be. Now, I haven't seen that particular map, but I suspect that that map is going to run right along 1967 borders. Of course, Israel has said she cannot return to 1967 borders because they are not defensible. President Obama says that negotiations should be resumed on the basis of 1967 borders with land swaps. Now, in this particular article today, Abbas actually made the statement that they would consider, that the Palestinians would consider land swaps as part of the final solution to everything. Matter of fact, let me read it to you. If the Israelis comply with our demands, we will be prepared to return to the negotiations, the Palestinian president said. He said that the PA did not rule out the possibility of land swaps with Israel as part of a two-state solution. Now, what do we mean by land swaps? Well, there are 300,000 Jews now living in the area called the West Bank that the Palestinians claim for their own. They acknowledge that it's impractical to uproot 300,000 Jews and to move them into Israel. Now, that doesn't even count the 250,000 Jews that are now living in East Jerusalem. So how do you solve this mammoth problem? Well, the answer has been land swaps. They think they can take about 3 or 4% of the West Bank area and take that 3 or 4% where the highest concentration of Jewish population is and secede that to Israel in exchange for land of the same size in another location. So he's saying, we're willing to do that. We're willing to consider land swaps, which is what President Barack Obama proposed way back when was that May the 19th of last year in his famous speech where he, for the first time, became a president to endorse 1967 borders, even though he did qualify it with land swaps. Well, that certainly incensed the people of Israel and all the friends of Israel because there's nothing in Resolution 242, which was passed by the United Nations after the 1967 war, that says that Israel should withdraw to 1967 borders. You say, but they took that land away from the Palestinians in 1967. No, they didn't. The Palestinians did not control that land in 1967. The country of Jordan controlled that land in 1967. It was Jordanian troops that fought against the fledgling state of Israel in 1948 and 49. And when the armistice, the ceasefire, was declared, Jordan remained there, and Jordanian troops were the troops that were right across the dividing fence between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem for 19 years. They were not Palestinians at all. Now think about this, because if you just read the papers, you never would guess this. The Palestinians had no state. As a matter of fact, they really weren't hardly known as Palestinians up until that time. So what's this all amount to? Well, when President Obama said that peace talks should be resumed on the basis of 1967 boundaries, that was the boundaries up till the 1967 war, Israel said, wait a minute, because what happened was in Resolution 242, the UN resolution called for borders to be negotiated between the two parties and that those borders should be secure. Well, Israel said our borders are not secure. We're only 9 miles wide at the waist. How does anyone possibly defend a country 9 miles wide at the waist, especially when you're surrounded by enemies? Well, the answer is you don't. So that's the reason that the UN resolution did not call for them to withdraw to 1967 borders. It stated that they should trade land for peace and that the borders should be agreed by negotiation between the two parties. So that's the reason when Mahmoud Abbas made his unilateral move to have the United Nations declare that the borders of Israel should be the 1967 borders. That's the reason that Israel adamantly opposed it, because it was actually a violation of the UN's own resolution. So anyway, I don't want to get too complex with you today, but nevertheless, that's an overview of what indeed has happened. So talks resumed today, and the Palestinian Authority presented their map of what the borders of the new Palestinian state should look like. The Israelis did not present a map today, but they said they will present one soon. So the quartet supposedly is going to take the Israeli map and the Palestinian map and see if they can make them meet together, see if some way they can work out where the borders should be. Now, if they can solve the border problem, then they now have solved the settlement problem, because the complaint of the Palestinians against the Israelis is you're building on territory that will belong to us. Therefore, you should not be doing that, and they have insisted that all building in the settlements would stop. However, if by January the 23rd, which in case you haven't checked is, 20 days from right now, if they in fact do get these borders agreed upon, and that's a big, big if, but if they would, then there's no more settlement problem, which would then enable the Palestinians to resume face-to-face negotiations without losing face, without backing down on their word. And actually, all this was stated in this article, which appeared just today from the Jerusalem Post. It's entitled, PA Gives Borders and Security Positions to Israel. First direct meeting between Israel and the Palestinians in over a year. It ends in Amman. Jordanian foreign minister says he doesn't want to raise expectations, but dialogue shouldn't be discounted. The article goes on to say the Palestinians reportedly passed their positions on borders and security to Israel. And then later on in the article it says that this meeting will be followed by a second meeting the meeting was followed by a second meeting without quartet representatives. The quartet representatives were involved in the first meeting, and then Israel and the Palestinians met alone in the second meeting. And then it goes on to say that after this meeting, which concluded today, additional meetings will be planned. The article goes on to tell us that Moko, who is the negotiator on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, according to the report, said he would present Israel's position on the issues in the coming weeks. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this develop. Now, the goal is a total peace agreement by December of 2012, which now is 11 months away. If they get that done, the Bible prophesies that that will trigger the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. I don't think you're listening to me. If they get that done, an agreement that settles all outstanding issues, including borders, including the status of Jerusalem, and in particular the status of the Temple Mount, if they get those things done, and the Temple Mount is placed under a sharing arrangement like the Bible says it will be, then the Bible says that's what will trigger the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. Now, that's not all that's going on the prophetic front, however, because also overnight, let me see if I can find the article for you. Iran threatens to take action if the U.S. carrier returns to the Persian Gulf. The article states, Iran will take action if a U.S. aircraft carrier which left the area because of Iranian naval exercises returns to the Gulf. The state news agency quoted Army Chief Ayatollah Salehi as saying on Tuesday. This particular aircraft carrier went through the area called the Straits of Hormuz when Iran was trying to cut it off from everyone. And this ship went through there just to let everybody know these are international waters and Iran does not have the right to block this off. Now then, Iran is saying, you come back through. Now let me just read it to you so you can hear exactly what they said. Iran will not repeat its warning. The enemy's carrier has been moved to the Sea of Oman because of our drill. I recommend and emphasize to the American carrier not to return to the Persian Gulf, Salehi told the Iranian news agency. I advise, recommend, and warn them, the Americans, over the return of this carrier to the Persian Gulf because we are not in the habit of warning more than once, the semi-official Fars news agency quoted Salehi as saying. So they're saying, don't bring your ship back in here. Well, that's international waters. For them to try to tell the United States, you cannot bring this ship back in here, is an assertion of sovereignty over the Straits of Hormuz, which the United States is determined to keep open at all costs because 40% of the world's sea-shipped oil comes out of that particular area. So it's very important what's going on right now. If Iran decides to sink that ship, well, that would mean war, obviously. There's been a lot of rumors about us attacking Iran anyway, so treacherous waters.